My name is Cindy Lopez. I'm the Director of Community Connections here at CHC. And we're really happy to have you here this evening. How many of you have been here before? Been to a session, know CHC, familiar with CHC? Okay. So we have community education, just sessions like this, several times a week. And we go through the end of May. We take a little hiatus during the summer. We'll start back up again in September. So, and we're really excited that Dr. Pelayo is here this evening to share his expertise with you around sleep and sleepy teens. And he is, let's see if I get this right, clinical professor, Stanford Sleep Sciences and Medicine. So
I like the professor part the most.
The professor part. So we're really thrilled that he's here tonight, and he has a lot of expertise to share with you. He does really, he's had a long day, so we promised he would be able to be in the car by 8 o'clock. So you might wind up a little early, but and that's why he was asking you some questions now, so you can, figure out what you want to hear about. So anyway, thank you. We're glad that you're here tonight. If you have any questions about CHC, you can talk to me afterwards.
Hey guys, hi. I'm Rafael, Pelayo. Thanks for coming out. Microphone should be on. Can you hear me okay? They're recording. So since they're recording, the main thing, if you ever watch a recording, you can see how it's difficult to follow a lecture or talk if somebody's asking a question, but I start to answer the question, but you can't hear the question. So just be aware of that. I'm a physician at the Stanford Sleep Clinic. I've been at Stanford since 1993, longer than some of you have been alive. But I became interested in sleep back in the 80s. So when I was in high school, I was curious about why we sleep. And I had a lucid dream. That's when I became aware of a dream. And I think that kind of cued me into like what's going on, what's happening in our sleep. And I became curious about why animals dream. When I got to medical school, I decided I was thinking about doing maybe psychiatry or something. But the very first week there, I started visiting the sleep lab, and I got hooked. So since 1984, and pretty much since I found out that sleep medicine existed as a specialty, I wanted to be a sleep doctor. So that's what I did, and started giving lectures to high school students in the Bronx in the early 80s. Did that for a while. So I've done a bunch of talks, and I've been working a lot with teenagers. I've been here since '93, and I trained as a child neurologist, but I mostly see adults, and I work in the Department of Psychiatry. So I'm an employee of the Department of Psychiatry, but I train as a child neurologist, seeing mostly adults. Because a lot of what I do is I work a lot with families. Because if one person doesn't sleep well, it affects the entire family. It impacts other people. You know this from your own situation that you're in. And also, mostly problems run in families. It's odd to find a single person who snores in the family, or just one person with light sleep. Usually these problems run in families. So I like taking care of families a lot. We can talk about family issues. You guys have other things you could be doing instead of being here tonight, so please feel free to interrupt me. Something I say doesn't sound right. You want to question it. I don't mind doing that, as long as the group is okay with it, right? Because sometimes some people can distract the entire group. I got slides for you. We don't need to use them, but we have another young person there. Hi. How old are you?
I'm 11.
Are you the youngest person here tonight?
So,
Cool. And the oldest child here is you. You're 16. Hi. So is anything going on with your sleep that you wanted me to talk about?
not really.
Do you like sleeping?
Yes.
Why are you here tonight? What'd you come here for? What'd you come here for? Do you think, did they have trouble sleeping, your parents, and they want you to see what's going on? Is that it? Is that what's happening? So who's on the video? Do you know who's on the video clip? Who are these guys? The other kids may know. Some of the adults may know. Yeah. And what are they doing? Yeah, but the thing about them, one of the things about the Pokemon that's interesting to me is if any of you spend money on Pokemon, you know that it's an ingenious marketing thing because all the Pokemon evolve. So you know that whatever Pokemon you have to buy 2 of them because they have the other one that they do. But one of the things I think that pretty much all kids know as soon as you become aware that you're a kid is that you're going to change, you're going to grow. Right? You've been aware of that. Ever since you're little, you've been told you're going to grow. And you look at your parents and say, what are they like? And think about, well, am I going to be like them? And you think that may be good or bad if you watch what's happening with your parents. But you kind of always have this idea that you're going to change. Just some have things with the Pokemon. They're always changing. You guys are always changing too. But how do you know that they're sleeping?
They're lying down, and obviously their eyes are closed.
So anybody who lays down with their eyes closed is sleeping?
They could be unconscious.
They could be unconscious. They could be faking it. But on any TV show, any play, anything you watch, whenever there's a performer, how do they let the audience know that the character's asleep and not awake or pretending they're asleep? They make them snore. Okay? Now, Pokemon aren't real, obviously, and the creators were very imaginative what they did, but they still made them sleep. Kind of interesting, right? They didn't have to make them sleep, but to make them relatable, they slept because everybody sleeps. Nobody's supposed to snore, by the way. Snoring is always abnormal. Right? But it's portrayed that because how can they let you know the character is sleeping unless they make a snoring sound? But snoring is not normal. Most people don't snore. You should never really snore. Breathing should be a silent activity. Sleeping is silent. Right? You're not supposed to make noise. There's an inherent paradox to sleeping. And if you think about what's happening with sleep, the paradox is everybody sleeps, but all animals can be attacked while they're sleeping. So in fact, the most dangerous thing you can do as an animal is sleep. So all animals protect themselves while they're sleeping. And we can talk a little bit about what kind of animals we are and how our brains protect ourselves while we sleep and what's going on with our sleep. But it's kind of a weird thing. So this way, there's some kids here, there's some of the mostly adults. I had some questions for you guys. I want to hear what your questions were. I have questions for you, and you guys just raise your hands, see what you think. And you should have a handout. So here's some questions for you. How many of you ever seen a classmate fall asleep in class? Have you guys, kids, have you guys seen it? Raise your hands high, please, so we can see. You ever seen anybody fall asleep in class? What's your name? Ethan. Anybody see anybody fall asleep in class? Or you're not sure?
Yes.
Like every day or not every day?
Once in my lifetime.
Once in your lifetime. Tell me your name again, please.
Izzy.
Easy, I'm sorry, didn't tell me your name. Easy, how many times do you see people fall asleep in class?
The second the teacher turns around, everyone.
That's how that goes? Madeline, is that true for you too?
No, not really. Only once or twice.
Once or twice, you've ever seen somebody fall asleep in class? Okay. Hi. You raising your hand or?
Yes, you asking if I see people sleeping in class?
Yeah.
I work with middle schoolers and I see students who literally fall asleep every single day.
Yeah, every day. Yeah, what's up with that?
Video games, we say.
Who's we?
Video games.
Yeah, I know what video games are, but you said we think, right? We think who? Who thinks?
Teachers and
Yeah.
staff.
So before video games, kids didn't fall asleep in class? I think they fall asleep in class a lot. In fact, the average for teenagers, once a week, somebody falls asleep in class. But it's really unusual for elementary school kids to fall asleep in class. 7 and 8, second, third graders don't fall asleep in class. It's unusual. In fact, if a first grader fell asleep in class, wouldn't the parents be notified? Right? But you're a teacher?
I work with teachers in class.
How many of the parents do you notify when those kids fall asleep in class?
Only in the meetings, really, when they have IEP meetings,
You're right.
we notify the parents, but normally we don't really let them know.
Yeah. Would you like your parents to be notified if you fall asleep in class? No? You would be notified? You would like to? You were notified. She was falling asleep in class? Not a lunch break? So as a teenager want to be notified? You want your parents to know if you fall asleep in class? No? Saying no, no, yes? But as parents, you want to know if your kid falls asleep in class? Would you like to be notified? Yeah. It's kind of a disconnect, right? As parents, you want to know, right? And the question is, why do people fall asleep in class? Okay, that's one question. Have you ever fallen asleep doing homework? Have you guys ever fallen asleep doing homework? Raise your hands, please, so we know. All of you guys, some teenagers over there, how old are you?
13.
13, hi. You fall asleep doing homework? Beckett, you too? Yep. Yeah, you're the one who wants to go home and do more work, right? Well, yeah. But maybe you fall asleep doing homework. Maybe there's something going on. We need to get you to sleep more, maybe. How many of you wake up tired? Raise your hands. How about the adults? Anybody waking up tired? Raise your hands as high as you can so we can see. Anybody not waking up tired? Thank you, good. Yeah, good for you. You don't wake up tired, Beckett? Good for you. Not often. Never qualifying. How many of you skip sleep to do your homework? Beckett. Yeah? Anybody you have easy skip sleep to do homework? No? Some of you who got here a little bit beforehand, some of you just coming in, hi, welcome. I mentioned that I have two kids, a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old. When my daughter, who's the oldest, who's 23 now, when she was in kindergarten, the kindergarten teacher thought it'd be a good idea to give him homework in kindergarten, to get him used to doing homework. I was appalled. And I told my daughter in kindergarten, you don't have to do your homework. Homework is optional. Sleeping is not optional, but your homework is optional. She said, I got to do my homework, Daddy. I have to do it. And she always did her homework, and now she's in law school. Now, my son heard me say this, and he stopped homework in high school. He just wouldn't do it. Stopped. He's 21. He's in college. He made it to college, but we don't know. He just stopped the homework. He just wouldn't do it. But you skip sleep to do your homework. It's actually an interesting situation. Right? What's healthier for you? What's more important? Actually, your teenagers, ask your parents how much of their high school homework they remember doing. I mean, they remember doing it, but what did you actually learn from doing it? Was there something there you actually remember that you've taken for the rest of your life? Hi, sir. Yeah? You pull all-nighters in high school or college or junior high school? College? Yeah, I started doing that a little bit. Did a little more in medical school. So I have some other questions for you guys. How many of you have ever seen somebody drive drowsy? No fun. Okay, for the kids, teenagers in the room especially, but Ethan, you too, 11-year-old Ethan. Who goes to sleep before their parents? Or do you stay up past your parents? So the question is, do you go to sleep after your parents do? Raise your hands if you go to sleep after your parents do. It's okay. Should we put your hand up? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah. What's the question say, ma'am? But okay, so you're a teenager. How old are you?
16.
Nice deep voice. Like it. You're good. Are you driving also? You can start to drive?
No. I
Okay.
think I like
So wait, okay, so raise your hands if you go to sleep after your parents do, among the teenagers and the 11-year-olds. Put it as high as you can, let's see. Okay, any kids here going to sleep before their parents do? You do? You do, okay, the younger ones, got it. All right, so it's a very adolescent thing to do. If you think about how teenagers live their lives a little bit, the teenagers will go to their bedrooms before their parents do. And teenagers do something that's very unadult-like. You convert your bedrooms into like mini studio apartments. And think a little about how you live your life. Do you spend, you guys want to, oh, you guys there. Do you guys spend more time sleeping in your room or do you spend more time awake in your room? How many of you spend more time awake in your bedroom than sleeping? Yeah, think about it. Right? Ethan, you spend more time awake in your bedroom than sleeping in your bedroom. Right? Yeah. Right? Because that's an interesting thing that you'll do. Right? You spend more time awake there than sleeping there. Adults don't do that. Most of us, have other parts of the house we hang out in or something. But it's a very adolescent thing to do, to kind of hang out in their room. How many of you have been woken up by text message? Any of you been woken up by text message? No? Yeah? You have? Have you ever woken anybody up with a text message? Okay.
I'm curious, how many parents let their kids have their phone in their room at night?
A lot of question. How many people let their kids have their phone in the room at night? How many of you don't let your kids have their phone in the room at night? How many of you has a fight with your kids over the phone?
I mean, not at night. I mean, it's just understood. Like it goes on the charger, and yeah, and I see it's on the charger.
But then my son gets up in the middle of the night.
14.
grabs it.
Your son gets in the middle of the night and grabs it. Yeah. How many of you teenagers get resentful about your parents messing with your phones? Is it an issue? Yeah. How many of you kids have your parents read every single text message you get? No. So when I was a boy, you hear a lot of these stories when I was a kid, when I was your age, Madeline. I have 5 sisters, and we had one phone. And whenever the phone rang, my dad wanted to know who was calling and why. How would you feel if every time you got a message at night, your parents said, who's texting you and why? Very different situation, right? Do you guys remember this, having just one phone and having your parents check? How many look at you guys nodding your heads, right? It's a very different situation now, isn't it? So we kind of need a new etiquette, right? How do we handle this thing? And we typically blame what's new. So a lot of us will blame the phone or video games. But these problems have been going on for a long, long time. They predate all this technology. Technology may not be helping, but we shouldn't be scapegoating it either, right? Especially not in Silicon Valley. So last question for you guys, then we can start to talk for real. How many of you wish you had more sleep? Raise your hands. Except Beckett, right? Beckett's cool. You're fine, Beckett? You don't need more sleep, right? You're good? I got you. Got you, I know. Under duress here. I got it. So this is what we're going to talk about. Normal sleep, what can go wrong, how to fix it. That good? So being a sleep doctor is actually a lot of fun. I've been a sleep physician a long time. It's really a fun gig because almost everybody gets better. For a doctor job, it's unusual for somebody not to get better. Almost all the patients I see, some don't, and I remember the ones who don't get better. I mean, I struggle with my patients who don't do well, and I've had some bad things happen to patients over the years. But by far, the vast majority of people we see get better. So it's a lot of fun. So no matter how long you've had sleep problems, usually you can get them better. And a lot of people we see a bunch of adults. I told you I see more adults than kids now. They'll say things like, oh yeah, I've not slept well since high school, or I've not slept well since college. It kind of begins way back then. And once you get better, they usually say, I wish we'd done this sooner. We'd take care of this sooner. So I'm glad you're here. So these are sleep disorders that we deal with: normal sleep, insomnia, sleep apnea is OSA. Parasomnia, the things that go bump in the night, like sleepwalking, night terrors. Restless legs. There's enough people in the room that somebody in the room has restless legs. This uneasy, creepy, crawly feeling in the legs is hard to describe. You're nodding your head. Something you want to share? You've had it? Yeah, it typically flares during pregnancy. And it's unusual to have a child. If you have it, 50% chance one of your kids will have it. Do you have more than one child? So probably one of them has it. Especially if they had any kind of issues with growing pains. And restless legs often mimics ADD behavior in kids. Yeah. So anyway, restless legs. Narcolepsy is the sort of teenagers and young adults. Our entire lives, pretty much entire life, either been awake, you've been dreaming, or sleeping but not dreaming. That's all we ever do. You're awake, you're dreaming, or you're sleeping but not dreaming. And those are three different states that the brain functions in. But those states are clearly marked off by the brain as different. But the mechanism in the brain that takes care of that, separating those states, can get damaged in narcolepsy. So narcolepsy, again, begins in teenagers with excessive sleepiness, because the sleep world is intruding into the awake world. And oftentimes the adults who had narcolepsy, say, began when they were teenagers, but nobody realized it. They just thought they were lazy, they had ADD, they were inattentive, they thought they were crazy, because sometimes they'll hallucinate. Because sometimes they start to dream when they're awake. And it's actually, now we know it's an autoimmune disease. It's kind of similar to diabetes type 1. Narcolepsy is an autoimmune disease. That's from Stanford research, yeah. So anyway, it's a real condition. It's about 1 in 2,000. So most high schools around here have more than 2,000 kids, right? So it's a lot more common than you think it is. And then finally, circadian disorders. Things have to do with the biological clock. The most common sleep disorder among teenagers is simply not getting enough sleep. It has this acronym of BIISS. Weird. BIISS. Behaviorally induced insufficient sleep syndrome. BIISS. Behaviorally induced insufficient sleep syndrome. It's not found in animals. You can't have an animal model for it, because animals, if you leave them alone, they'll sleep. Like on purpose, staying awake, for no good reason. Animals don't do that. They want to sleep, they want to sleep if they get a chance to sleep. So the most common condition among teenagers is not lifestyle reasons, not getting enough sleep. Behaviorally induced. It's influenced, either imposed by themselves or somebody's imposed it on them, but they're keeping themselves awake. Right? And I always remember being a parent, the first time you take your kids to the zoo. Remember all the adults in the room that have kids? Remember planning that trip to the zoo, and you're like excited, you're going to get to the zoo, and you tell them about the zoo. And yeah, I remember visions of monkeys swinging through the trees and lions roaring. And when you get to the zoo, what they're all doing, they're all just sleeping. And it's like you're just wishing that the animal would do something. The kid's bored now, right? The kid's falling asleep in the stroller because the animals are sleeping too. Yeah, because they just sleep. They have the chance to sleep. So the most common condition in teenagers is behaviorally induced insufficient sleep syndrome, BIISS. Second most common is delayed sleep phase syndrome, which is what's the last thing on that slide there. It's in front of you. Delayed sleep phase syndrome. If you've never seen a case, you've missed it. If you're a teacher, if you're a healthcare worker, if you've never diagnosed it, never recognized it, you've missed it. It's that common. It's super common. It's trouble falling asleep but not staying asleep. Most common, it's a very common pattern. Often the teenagers describe themselves as being a night owl or night person. And the thing with delayed sleep phase syndrome is there's something that happens to very unadult-like teenagers. Several things happen. One of them is they start sleeping in on weekends, right? 7 and 8-year-olds sleep in on weekends. 7 and 8-year-olds don't sleep in. Parents wish they would, but they don't, right? 7 and 8-year-olds don't sleep in. They just pop awake, right? Oh, off they go, buzzing around, right? The first evidence of you not getting enough sleep, having a sleep problem, is sleeping in on weekends. And why do we let our kids sleep in on weekends? Because they're not getting enough sleep, right? We feel bad for them. It's a very crazy thing, you think about it. Imagine this was food, and we tell our kids, Monday through Friday, I'm going to starve you. Saturday and Sunday, eat all you like. Monday, I'm starving you again.
Fasting.
What?
Intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
I know, I gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah, but people who are intermittently fast tend to be grumpy. And people who don't get enough sleep tend to be very grumpy. The first sign of lack of sleep is people tend to be inattentive. First thing that happens when you don't get enough sleep is you're inattentive. Tend to be irritable. Your memory's not quite as sharp, right? Just you notice yourself when you've had a good night's sleep, how good it feels, and how weird it feels when you're not having a good night's sleep. So what is the sleep disorder we deal with? Delayed sleep phase syndrome. I didn't finish telling you, so we're falling asleep but not staying asleep. And what happens with them is when teenagers start sleeping in longer on weekends for a variety of reasons, they may do something that's very un-adult-like. As an adult, you may sleep in an hour on the weekend, maybe 2 on the outside. You know, you're going to get up at 6:30, 7 o'clock, go to work. You might get up at 8. You're not going to get up much later than that, right? Teenager sleeping in till 1 o'clock in the afternoon is not unusual. But they're falling asleep much later also. They're falling asleep, let's say, on school nights, they fall asleep at maybe 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. But on weekends, they go to bed at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So they're shifting their brain so far. And what happens is on Sunday nights, the brain does not know how to shift back to the original bedtime well. So they tend to lay in bed, but they can't fall asleep. Then they wake up tired. And delayed sleep phase syndrome is an interesting condition to look at and read about because it was only described in 1981, which in the world of medical conditions is relatively recent, 1981. It was described in 1981 among a group of young adults who were depressed but did not do well with medication. They had atypical depression. Medications didn't work, therapy didn't work for them, and they had a different sleep pattern than other people with depression. Most people who are depressed tend to wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep, or wake up early in the morning, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and can't get back to sleep. That's the pattern with depression. But these people didn't have trouble staying asleep, they had trouble falling asleep, which is different. Most adults say, I can fall asleep okay, but I have trouble staying asleep. So they had a different sleep pattern and didn't reply to medication. And they simply changed their sleep schedules, and when they changed the sleep schedules of these young adults, their mood improved and they corrected their sleep problem. By making them stay awake, by the way. They made them stay awake around the clock until they got to sleep at the right time. It's called chronotherapy. We don't do that anymore. But they discovered that by changing the schedule of somebody's sleep schedule, you could change their mood. Somebody who was thought to be depressed now behaves normal and feels fine. Chronotherapy. And then after they found it in 1981 in these young adults, they looked in 86 and they found it among teenagers. And now they realize it's probably the most common condition among teenagers, other than just not getting enough sleep total. So read about delayed sleep phase syndrome, especially somebody who's having issues with their mood, or falling asleep. Yes, sir.
Why are they not doing chronotherapy?
Oh, well, chronotherapy, it was the idea of using the clock. And the way that they used to do it, they called it also Nintendo therapy, by the way, of having video games be therapeutic, is they would have somebody stay awake. So let's say you normally fall asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. Keep them awake for 3 hours, make them go to bed at 5. Then make them go to bed at 8 a.m., then 11, and go work your way around the clock. And that's really hard to do. So chronotherapy was found to be effective in 1981. Now we don't do that. Now we use bright light and other ways of doing it. But the point was that you could change somebody's mood by changing the timing of their sleep. That was the thing. So anyway, that's a real condition. And these were all people who were said to be depressed. Now, if they hadn't figured that out, what happens to people who don't respond to medication when they're depressed? They give them shock therapy. That would have been the next thing they would have gotten, these people. Instead, they just made them change their sleep schedule and they got better. Isn't that cool? So as I told you, mostly patients will get better, and it's a fun thing to do. If you didn't have to sleep, would you bother doing it, Beckett? Beckett, if you didn't have to sleep, would you bother doing it?
I'd rather not.
That's right. Right. Why bother doing it? Think of how your life would be different if you didn't have to sleep. Wouldn't it be awesome? Think of the money you save when you travel. Right? You spend more money in your hotel room than you do in your airfare, don't you? Right? You'll put up with a cheap airplane ticket in the middle seat, but you don't want a crappy hotel room bed. I'm sorry if you use the word crappy, Ethan. I'm sorry. But anyway, but just to think about it, right? If you didn't have to sleep, would you bother doing it? Okay? If I share good news with you guys, at Stanford right now we have some medication that's being developed that'll make you feel like you slept 8 hours and only 4. So who wants to try it? You didn't even ask the side effects. Your hair could fall out. I'll do it. Sign me up. Anything, right? That's the real question. We don't have anything like that. The question is sleep an inconvenience? And that's how people view sleep as an inconvenience. If we didn't have to do it, would we bother doing it? One of the earliest sleep scientists said, if sleep has no function, it's the biggest mistake evolution ever made. Because why do we do this? It's the craziest thing when you think about it. Right? It's insane. Why do we do it? I mean, you folks living in Silicon Valley, some of you may work in tech. There's a bunch of pitch meetings going on. We're right off Sand Hill Road. Who knows how many deals were made today and how many more they're going to make tomorrow? But nobody's made a deal, I bet, to raise money to make a sleeping robot. Like a waste of time. Why would you make a robot that sleeps, right? They wouldn't do that. They do the opposite. And there is, and we get approached, there are people who are looking for technology to make you hack your sleep, to make you sleep less but feel more refreshed in less time. They'd love for you to do that. Imagine if we really had technology to make you sleep less and feel just as well. What would happen if that really existed? Wouldn't your employer expect you to use it? Would the military, if you didn't do it, wouldn't you be a slacker at the company? Right? What would the army do with it? The military would put it up, would immediately make everybody take care of it, do that, right? So the issue is, why do we sleep, right? And there's a paradox of sleep, as I mentioned before, right? Why do we bother doing it? So why do we sleep? Why do we dream? Do dreams have meanings? Tomorrow, if any of you want to come to class, I teach a class on campus at 1:30 at CMEX Auditorium GSB. There's actually, did any of you go to Stanford? Undergraduate, you went to Stanford? Did you come to you? Yeah. There's a class in Stanford called Sleep and Dreams that Dr. Dement used to teach. You remember, may have heard of it. You knew it? Did you ever take it? Or heard of it? It's harder now. So anyway, he retired and I teach the class. So tomorrow's lecture is at 1:30, from 1:30 to 3 o'clock. We're going to have a guest speaker talk about how to interpret your dreams and what goes on in your dreaming with a psychoanalyst. Because we don't often get to talk to a psychoanalyst anymore. It's kind of a dying art. But there is a psychoanalyst in Palo Alto, and he'll be lecturing, Dr. Randy Charlton. So if you want to catch an extra lecture, come at 1:30, CMEX. Get there a little early so you have time to park. But just go to GSB and come to class if you want to. The campus is open to everybody, so anybody can come in, visit, catch a class, hang out with a bunch of 19, 20-year-olds. There's about, At the GSB is a graduate school of business. There's a big auditorium there called CMEX. There's a big mural that changes colors, if you've ever been there. It's a nice building. Anyway, go there. If you want to come to class, you're welcome to come to class. So June 29th, the first iPhone was released. 2007. When did delayed sleep phase syndrome get described? 1981. This is not the phones, guys. But you know, when you guys are in charge, you people in the back and you people like you, Ethan, when you guys are in charge of the world, if there's ever an international holiday that you guys are going to declare, it's going to be June 29th. That'll be the day you guys are going to plant the flag. That'll be the International Harmony Day of the planet, what brought us all together, June 29th, 2007, right? So let's think about the phones, because we were talking about technology. What happens when you leave the house and your phone is uncharged or partially charged? What happens when you leave the house and you're like, I didn't charge my phone all the way, right? Doesn't that weigh in your mind the rest of the day? You're looking for a charger. You're asking people if they have their charger with them. If somebody dares call you instead of text, you go, should I answer this call and drain my battery? Is it worth it to talk to this person? I'm not going to talk to this person. My battery's not fully charged. When you finally find a charger, right, what do you do when you plug it in? You go, ah, sigh of relief. You let out a sigh of relief. The phone worked just fine at half charge, but you know it's not at its full potential. That's the issue. And the same thing with sleep. You can get by with very little sleep, but you're not at your full potential, right? You do better with more sleep. But we can get by with less sleep. If I ask anyone about your sleep needs or sleep desires, you're going to give me two numbers. If I say, well, how many hours do you like to get? People say things like, well, I like to get 9, but as long as I get 7. Or I like to get 8, but as long as I get 5.5. You have these two numbers in your head. And what people tend to do is get as little sleep as possible all the time, because it's an inconvenience to them. And in reality, human sleep is probably seasonal, right? We sleep better. We sleep longer in long winter nights. But human sleep is probably seasonal, right? If you've got friends or colleagues in Alaska, totally they sleep more in the winter, less in the summer. We've got excellent color vision. We have lousy night vision. What hunts humans? What attacks humans? Lions and tigers? I mean, we live in this beautiful area. You guys can go up to the dish, right, and go check out what's happening. You go hiking up in Woodside. Nice. You go there, you go hiking at night, what's going to happen? And you get attacked by mountain lions. They say it's your own fault for being up there, right? It's your own fault for going up there. If you go jogging, in the middle of the night through any of those trails, you know it's dangerous, right? So you have to think a little about the kind of animals we are and what our predators are and how do we adapt and how this plays out. So let's talk about what's good sleep like, okay? Let's talk about really good sleep. Who are the best sleepers in society across the board? Think of all ages. Think of it, anybody all sleep? What? You really want to sleep like a baby? You want to be incontinent? Wear a diaper? Babies sleep very deeply for short periods of time, like 40 to 60 minutes. Then they pop awake. So they sleep very deeply, but they don't sleep that great. Any other ages, you think? Elementary, yes. That's our best sleepers, elementary school students. Your life is reflected in your sleep. Your sleep is a reflection of your life. It's a simple platitude, but it's a true statement. Your life is reflected in your sleep is reflected in your life. I've said that so many times. Actually, the symbol for sleep medicine for a field is actually the yin and yang, the black and white symbol, so I keep it on my lapel, right? I keep it on my ID. And it's because you don't separate the mind from the brain in sleep. It kind of goes together, right? It's day and night, it all goes together. Your sleep is reflecting your life is reflecting how you sleep. So I want you to think about the life of a typical 8 or 9-year-old person and think about your own sleep and how your kids are sleeping. Typical 8 or 9-year-old person comes home from school, maybe has a snack, has to start their homework. They think they have lots of homework, but they really don't, but they think they do. When you're 8 or 9 years old, you do your homework, you have dinner. By the time you finish dinner, finish your homework, it's too late to go outside. 8 or 9-year-old kids aren't hanging out outside a lot at night when they're little, right? When you're 8 or 9 years old, you have a set bedtime. You hang out with your family for a little while, you have a set bedtime. 3 and 4-year-olds argue about their bedtime sometimes, but 8 and 9-year-olds kind of have the routine down. 8 and 9-year-old goes to their room, parents stop by the room still when you're 8 or 9 years old, and I'm generalizing, there's all kinds of families, all kinds of situations, so I'm just obviously generalizing. But an 8 or 9-year-old person goes to their room, parents stop by the room, say goodnight, I love you, turn off the lights, right? When you're 8 or 9 years old, do you worry about the mortgage or the rent? No. Safety of the house taken care of for you. Somebody wakes up in time to go to school, clothes are laid out for you, somebody gives you breakfast, somebody takes you to school, somebody checks your homework before you leave the house, make sure you did your homework correctly, make sure you took your homework with you, right? How will do 8 or 9-year-old people sleep? They fall asleep easily, sleep through the night, wake up refreshed, run around all day. We established they don't sleep in on weekends, they don't nap. 8 and 9-year-old people go to bed feeling safe, comfortable, and loved. They have serenity in their lives. You got to think about yourselves. Do you have serenity in your life? Or do your kids have serenity in your lives? Do you go to sleep now in that state of serenity? Or you go, you're thinking, I got 6.2 hours before I fall asleep, and I got to take care of this, take care of that tomorrow, right? Right, and that's not the same way. So that's really our goal, is to sleep kind of in that state of mind. Right, how do you tuck yourself in? How do you provide that for yourselves? Hi. So think about how 8 and 9-year-old people sleep, and that's really what you want to get to. This situation where you're at ease, feeling good about things, right? Remember my teenager, well, he's now 21. Our son would do his homework. He finally get to do the homework sometimes, not always. We would do it, and then you find the homework on the printer, like the next day, like he didn't even like take it in to school. He didn't even hand it in. The next day it's still on the printer. I'm like, you can turn in that homework? Everyone goes, yeah, well, whatever. Just wasn't. So how do you fall asleep? Do you crash now? Right? Right? How many of you, that's a crazy word to use. How do you fall asleep? Do you drift off to sleep? Or do you crash? Right? The cup of coffee in your hand, right? Mouth open, snoring, not healthy. So this guy, this isn't good. This is 101, guys. That's 101. 101, there's a Greyhound bus that leaves, there's a red-eye bus that leaves LA at night and drives through the night, and arrives in San Jose in the morning. So who's riding that bus from LA, the Greyhound bus from LA to San Jose? People who got on the bus, they want to sleep on the bus. And the bus driver wants, a good bus driver is going to let their passengers sleep. So the bus driver stopped in Gilroy to get a cup of coffee and flipped the bus before he made it to San Jose. That's a real accident. That's here. That's 101. He stopped at San Jose to get a cup of coffee. He stopped in Gilroy to get a cup of coffee and flipped the bus before he made it. Fell asleep at the wheel. That's a real deal. So that's not that long ago. Some of you may have seen the story, some of you didn't, because it's a local story. There's accidents every day, people falling asleep at the wheel. It's such a common scenario that it's not really talked about much because it just happens. It's just part of the thing. It doesn't make national news because it's just too common a thing. I mentioned earlier the most common cause of death among teenagers, 16 to 24-year-olds, young adults, is car accidents. Well, this is how many died in 2013, 2,163 died. That's 6 a day, die every day, car accident, 6 a day. That's the good news, guys. It used to be 8. It's gone down. It used to be 8 a day would die in somewhere in the United States from a car accident. Now it's only 6, because kids are now driving later, like you. People are waiting a little bit, and cars have gotten safer. But it's still the most common cause of death. So why is this happening? When you talk with the driving people, they say, well, it's just they're inexperienced. But that's not it, I don't think. Some of them are just sleep deprived. Because people who are inexperienced don't fall asleep. You don't fall asleep looking for an address to a store or house you've never been to before. If you're looking for something you've never been to before, you're vigilant. People fall asleep driving alone on familiar roads. Things that you really don't have to really pay attention to. That's when people fall asleep, right? It's the experienced driver that falls asleep sometimes. That's my son when he was a long time ago. And back then I had to ask him, please, I need to take a photo for a lecture. Can you please play with your phone in bed? I don't do that, Dad. Please just do it for me. No, he doesn't. Now he sleeps. Now he sleeps with his phone next to him. I remember my daughter, you asked a question about sharing a phone. My daughter's 23-year-old, who's now in law school, but at the time she was in high school, I said, just, you know, do the calls ever wake you up? Yeah, I get woken up by text messages all the time. Because what happens is the kid that does the homework has become a very social activity. And this is something you have to think a little bit about. When you ask a group of kids why you're staying awake, they say the homework. When you ask parents or teachers, they'll say, well, homework has the same amount they've always given to them. It's they're wasting time, they're doing other things, they're slowed down. But I think also culturally things have changed because the kids are doing homework in small groups now, virtually with them. Because what happens is you're doing your homework, but you're also chatting and checking in with your friends the whole time. And you often learn, when I was a kid, we'd do homework as fast as you can because you're by yourself. Maybe you call somebody if you didn't find something. It'd be unusual for you to pick up the phone. They got to talk to somebody's father first, right, before you could do that. So you didn't want to do that if you could avoid it. But the kids are now doing homework very socially among themselves. And it takes longer to make a decision in a group than as an individual. But also, if somebody's caught up with their homework, that person becomes the point person to give advice to the other kids about their sleep. And you know among your circle of peers who's finished their homework, who had a late session and who didn't. You may discuss in advance, so you guys work each other out. So we got to maybe change the idea of how this is done. And there are things people talk about, like flipping the classroom and things. But this is a factor, how kids are doing this. Homework has changed. The need for sleep is biological, but the way you sleep is learned. Sleeping is a learned activity. You've actually been taught how to sleep. So all of you who've got kids who are not sleeping well, it's your fault for not teaching them how to sleep well, maybe. Because we're taught how to sleep. Sleeping is a biological thing, but it's also a cultural thing. It's a learned behavior. It's a lot like food. All newborn babies throughout the world drink milk. 5-year-olds throughout the world have different diets. The need for food is biological, but what you eat is cultural. So you're taught how to sleep. You don't believe me that you've been taught how to sleep? It's so easy to prove. Those of you who are couples here that had little kids, do you remember one of the kids would come into the bedroom at night sometimes? They always went to the same parent. You didn't go to either parent, you went to the same parent usually, right? You ask the kid why. Ethan, why are you laughing? What's going on? What's going on?
Because it's exactly the case.
Yeah? Which parent do you go to? Mom? Why don't you go to dad? Because he ignores you?
Because he does not leave enough space for
There you go. I know. Dad wants a space. But Ethan, in the dark, do you know which side of the bed your mom's on and your dad's on? Of course you do, because they don't switch sides, do they? They don't switch sides. You guys want to play a trick on Ethan? Switch sides. See how it goes. Okay? But think about this. The first time you ever pair off with somebody, the first time you pair off with somebody, you pick a side and that other person picks a side. It's never discussed after that. That's my side, that's your side. It's understood. Right? And when you travel, you go to your sides, you just know where it is. I've learned that the only time people change sides is much older couples, if they have an agreement among them that whoever gets up most often go to the bathroom sleeps closer to the bathroom. That's the only time they ever switch sides. Other than that, they don't do that. Right? And in fact, not only do you kind of you have your own side that you get to, if your spouse, your partner is away, and you sleep on their side, they view it as an intrusion. Right? Why are you sleeping on my side of the bed? Right? You might slide to the middle a little bit, but would you get completely to their side? That would be considered weird if you did that, right? That'd be a problem. Why are you doing that, right? If you don't believe me that sleep is a learned behavior, simply tonight, wherever you guys sleep, rotate your body and put your feet where your pillow normally goes, in the same bed. Same mattress, same room, same everything you always slept in. Just rotate your body in bed, see what happens. You're going to feel very strange. You may even fall out of bed, right? It's a weird thing. Right? So sleeping is a learned behavior. So we actually we teach each other how to sleep. The idea of sleep is protecting us is a simple thing to show you guys. All animals must protect themselves while they're sleeping. And the easiest example, some of you may know this already, is how do dolphins sleep. Think of a dolphin's world. Swim fast, avoid sharks, eat fish, make more dolphins, right? How does a dolphin sleep? Some of you know. It's on the diagram. They sleep half their brain at a time. Half their brain sleeps, the other half stays awake. So the animal can swim and sleep at the same time. Other birds that migrate long distances, like albatrosses and things like that, they also have this ability to sleep half their brain at a time. Kind of a cool thing to do if you think about it. How many of you like to do that yourself? Right? 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 And how about the seals? You know how the seals sleep? We're in California. When they're in the ocean, they sleep like the dolphins do, half their brain at a time. But when they're on the beach, they sleep both halves of the brain at the same time. They switch depending on the environment. Again, your sleep's a function of your life. Your life's a function of your sleep. It goes in both directions. I have said that so many times, that saying. I've said it so many times that a student in my class put it on a blog, and it got picked up on another blog, and it's been repeated. And I was at a party about 3 years ago, and somebody walked over to me and said, gotten here from Lebanon, and said, I saw your name on a mattress store in Lebanon with that quote on it. And they took a picture of it. So if you look up my last name and sleep quotes, that shows up so many times. It keeps repeating. It's next to the Dalai Lama, Benjamin Franklin. All these things, my name's on it. You know, Plato. It's a weird thing. And it's because some Stanford student just put it up and it got echoed by the internet. So it's gotten picked up as a sleep saying. But it's true. It's just a throwaway thing. But it's true. Because think about it. Your sleep's a function of your life. Life's a function of your sleep. It goes around. So there are different sleep stages that you've heard of. I told you that your entire life you're either dreaming, you're awake, or you're sleeping but not dreaming. The dreaming sleep we call REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, REM. And the person who coined the phrase lives right on the campus, Bill Dement. You can meet him. He's 90 years old. You'll be in class tomorrow, hopefully. He's 90. He was typing, and he didn't want to type the whole word. He called it REM because he was just in dreaming. And the rest of sleep, he thought, non-REM, disrespectful to it. But dreaming is only about 20% of the night, 25% maybe, younger people. The bulk of sleep is non-REM sleep. You need to toss that away. There's different kinds of sleep. There's a light sleep, there's intermediate sleep, there's deep sleep. But something that often is not known is nobody sleeps through the night. You all wake up during the night, right? If we really slept 8 hours in a row, wouldn't the lions and tigers figure that out, eating us in the caves 30,000 years ago? Humans wake up about every 90 minutes. Every 90 minutes, everybody in this room opens their eyes, make sure everything's okay, and we go back to sleep. Don't remember, you only wake for a few seconds. But nobody in this room has slept continuously for 8 hours. It just wouldn't work. Every 90 minutes, usually at the end of every dream, we have a body movement, we change positions, we make sure everything's okay, we go back to sleep. You only wake for a few seconds. Yes, sir?
What about like people in the say?
With sleep apnea, they wake up too. They wake up even more often. We all wake up. If you didn't wake up at all and just stayed there, you'd have bed sores, right? We know that. When people are ill, we have to move them around because we need to move in our sleep. So waking up is normal. Everyone's having trouble going back to sleep. So we've heard about dreaming sleep. We've heard about deep sleep. That's only about 10% of the night. But it's the kind of sleep that often gets ignored. Any conversation about sleep, and that's a lighter sleep, stage 1 sleep. Stage 1 is how we enter sleep. And all of you have seen stage 1 sleep many, many times. You go to a talk, the speaker's droning on and on. You can't believe you're stuck here. Can I get out of here? What's going to end? Oh, man, this is really bad. I don't want to be here. You look around the room. Somebody in the room's head is nodding. Eyes are rolling, somebody's head. Or you watch that person. Eventually, you see that person and go. If you nudge them, what's the first thing they say to you? I'm awake. I'm resting my eyes. They were asleep. When you're in stage 1 sleep, when you're in a light sleep, it actually feels like you're awake. That's the thing about it. It feels like you're awake. So people tend to sleep more than they realize. And they underreport how much they're sleeping because they interpret this light sleep as being awake. And people say, well, I guess I must have been asleep because time went by, but I don't remember sleeping. I thought I was awake the whole night. People think that they're awake when in fact they're asleep. Think about it. People think they're awake when in fact they're asleep. In light sleep, in stage 1 sleep, you can do anything that's overlearned. Anything that you know how to do really, really well, you can do in stage 1 sleep. In stage 1 sleep, you can steer a car. In stage 1 sleep, couldn't all of you right now put the key in the ignition, blindfolded, turn on the engine, shift gears, and pull out of your driveway? Right? And if you're lucky, you won't hit anything, but you might. Anything that's overlearned, you can do in stage 1 sleep. And that's why people fall asleep at the wheel. Because they think, oh, I'm just drifting, I'm okay. They don't realize that they're falling asleep. They have these little micro sleeps. That's really dangerous. If you've ever driven a car, don't remember having passed some exits and you're already at your destination, you were asleep at the wheel. You're just lucky to be alive, right? Lucky to be alive. Remember, it's the most common cause of death. So light sleep, we have a lot of it. So the other thing about sleep we should point out is the dreaming. When does dreaming occur? Let's see if I'm going to show you here. If you can catch it. I'm colorblind anyway. I don't know. This thing's not flying anyway. Oh, this is going to screen. It looks tiny. Oh, it's ridiculous. Okay. So look at your handout, guys. Those little darker bars on this side and over there, the latter part of the night, your dreams about every 90 minutes. As the night goes on, you get more and more dreams. The dreams get longer, more intense, and more vivid. The bulk of your dreams occur just before you wake up. The more you sleep, the more dreaming time you're going to have. Kids, how many times have you heard anybody tell you, I want you to follow your dreams? But what do they do to you? They cut off your dreaming time. That's what they're really doing. Whenever you sleep deprive yourself, you're not depriving yourself of any sleep. You're depriving specifically of your dreaming time. That's what you're cutting off. You're cutting off your chance to dream. Okay? So that's why I made this saying, if life's a journey, right, the snooze button's a pothole. I mean, we should never hit that snooze button. Just don't do it. Just because you have it's a technological thing that was never tested to be healthy or not. But it's technology, a snooze button, right? When somebody invented a snooze button, every single alarm clock had to have a snooze button. Your phones have snooze buttons on them. But what's the science behind that? What are you really doing? The alarm clock is already telling you, I'm going to interrupt your sleep. And I use an alarm clock about once a week, because that once a week there's something I have to do that I can't be late for. The rest of the time, I've got a little flexibility. So I wake up before the alarm clock routinely, but I have it. And if I'm taking a trip, I'm traveling, different time zones, I set an alarm, right? So, and my daughter, when she was a teenager, I said to her, let's not have this phone in your room. She goes, Daddy, I need it because it's my alarm clock. And I said to her, we can afford an alarm clock. You don't need to use your phone. And you can put your phone in airplane mode. The alarm still works. But they think, right, because when you're a teenager, your brain has never worked as well as it does now as a teenager. You're smarter and sharper than you ever have been. So you naturally think you're smarter than your parents. But you're not. You just think you are, right? You know things that they don't know, but they have more knowledge. But that's the whole thing with it, right? So what's happening with the snooze button, you're interrupting your dreaming sleep. And what are you replacing it with? Light sleep, stage 1 sleep. It's just a bad deal. So if you're going to bother with alarm clocks, set it for the time that you must absolutely drop dead. You have no choice but to get out of bed. And that's it. Instead, how many have kids who don't wake up to alarm clocks? Look around, guys. How did this happen? Remember, sleep is a learned activity. How did your kids learn to ignore alarm clocks? Because the alarm clock became something for you to wake up and get to your kid. It wasn't for them to wake up. And if instead you say getting them awake is such a hassle, I'm setting the alarm clock earlier and earlier and earlier, you're just setting an alarm clock for yourself to go wake up the kid. And the kid knows that when the alarm clock goes off, it's not for me, it's for them to come get me. And they've learned to ignore alarm clocks. Because they become conditioned to ignoring them. Because why wouldn't it work otherwise? Because the sound doesn't mean that to them. By the way, though, there's another kind of sleep. We're going to talk about delta sleep, deep sleep, the deepest sleep. That's the first third of the night. That's when people sleepwalk. That's when people have night terrors. It's also when people grow. You're not growing all the time. The lengthening of your bones occurs when you are sleeping in the first third of the night. They've actually measured it in animals. The lengthening of the bones occurs in deep sleep. That's your deepest sleep, delta sleep. First third of the night. That's when your bones get longer. And when you're in that state, it's hard to wake you up. So they've actually tested this on teenagers. Underwriters Laboratory tested smoke alarms. Do not wake up teenagers when they're in delta sleep. So a smoke alarm in the first third of the night is for you to go get your kid. You can't count on a smoke alarm waking up a sleeping teenager. They sleep that deeply. That's actually been tested. In your heads, there's a clock. It's not a hypothetical thing. There's a real little piece of your brain that measures time. It's essential for our survival as animals to predict dawn and dusk. If you can't predict dawn and dusk, we're in trouble. We've got excellent color vision. We have lousy night vision. If we're hunters and gatherers at some point in our history, if you left the safety of the village to go hunt and gather, you got to get back to the village before it gets dark. Because if it gets dark, you can be attacked by the nighttime hunters, right? And if you get back too early, you're wasting time. So you need a mechanism in your brain to predict dawn and dusk on a planet where the seasons are changing. So your brain has a real little clock. Where do you think the clock is? This is a perfect spot. Because how does the brain know what time it is? It's based on how much light it's getting in the eyes when you first open your eyes. And the optic nerves in our heads crisscross. Optic nerves, can you see over there in the picture? Optic nerves are crisscrossing. And that makes an X, and the Greek word for X is chi. You learn about chi-square at some point. So that's the suprachiasmatic nucleus. There's a little part of the brain that measures time right where the optic nerves cross. The first spot in the body where information from both eyes meet. That perfect spot, exactly where the clock's located. It's more important for you to know what time it is than pretty much anything else for your brain at a very basic level. And I can prove that to you. This part of the brain, okay, we all live in the Bay Area, okay? We know one thing we all have in common, we know something about real estate, right? We know, right? Price of real estate is based on what? Location, right? If you're a neuron and want to find a nice place to live in the brain, the best spot to live in the entire brain is exactly where the clock's located. That's where the best blood supply in the entire brain circulates right around where that clock is. You can get a stroke and lose the piano lessons. You can get a stroke and not be able to walk or talk. You can't damage that clock. It's got a really robust blood supply. Is that essential for our life? And the brain's an electrical organ, and the electricity in the brain is used up. What's the currency to get things moving in our bodies? Adenosine triphosphate. Did you learn that in science class yet, Beckett? You're going to learn it as Sunday. ATP, remember that. Adenosine triphosphate. File that away. ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Who else knows about ATP already? You guys know?
That's the Krebs cycle.
Where does the ATP made? In the mitochondria. The best gift our mothers ever gave us was our mitochondria. We get our mitochondria from our moms mostly. And that's what makes ATP. Why is that important? Because that's energy. And the brain is using energy. The brain's an electrical organ. And when the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is used up, the waste product, the fuel, that waste product of it is called adenosine. That's what I'm showing you there. Why does that matter? Because the more adenosine in your brain, the sleepier you get. The more energy the brain's been using. As your ATP stores get depleted in your brain, you get sleepier, sleepier, and sleepier. Your adenosine in your brain builds. How do we block adenosine? Take a guess. Coffee. Coffee is an adenosine blocker. Okay? You can argue lots of things about coffee. You can discuss it all you like. There's a lot of interesting things, but there's no doubt in anybody's mind that caffeine is being marketed directly to teenagers. Okay? Directly to teenagers. It's the only drug they can get their hands on, no questions asked. Ethan, you can go to a Starbucks tonight and get a triple espresso. Nobody's going to card you. Nobody's going to say what's up. Nobody's going to ask you anything. They're just going to hand you your espresso. Okay? Crazy as that would be, you could get an espresso tonight, no questions asked, right? No problem. And you remember the movies in the 50s showing the teenagers? In the 50s, what were the kids doing after school in the 50s? Dancing around the jukebox, drinking milkshakes? You guys dancing around jukeboxes, drinking milkshakes? No. No. Right? Where are you welcome to after class? When you're in junior high school, where do you go after class? Coffee houses. They can hang there. There's Wi-Fi, there's things, right? Frappuccinos, all the stuff is catered directly to them. Not just those, I mean, all the soft drinks. Everything's marketed to the kids. Keep them awake. You can argue lots of things about coffee, and you can argue lots of things about history. There should be no doubt in your minds. For example, the Gulf War. Was the Gulf War a fight over oil? You can argue that. But there's no doubt historically that our first fight this country ever had, our first war was over coffee, was over caffeine. It was the Boston Tea Party that got the thing, people revolted. A bunch of other taxes going on in the colonies. When did they really flip out? When they taxed the tea. That's when it's that enough's enough. That's why we drink coffee. It was because of this, right? So that blocks coffee. Adenosine is what's blocking. That's why the coffee is important. Sleep impacts your behavior. And sleep disorders mimic attention issues, behavioral issues. Anybody who's not getting enough sleep is going to be more inattentive. It's going to be a hard time for you to focus. The estimate is about 25% of kids with ADD actually have sleep disorders that have not been addressed, not been taken care of. If you don't get enough sleep, what could be better than a little bit of a stimulant, right? Right? If you're not getting enough sleep, a cup of coffee and a cigarette sounds like not a bad deal. Not getting enough sleep, right? Stimulant, right? Sleep disorders mimic, because you don't see people when they're sleeping, you see them when they're awake. There's no doubt. If your kid snores in preschool, if your kid snores in preschool, quadruples the chance they're going to end up on Ritalin by the time they're second grade. Quadruples the chance they're going to end up on Ritalin. Simply snoring in preschool predicts that we're going to be put on Ritalin. or some kind of stimulant when you're a little bit older. That's a published data. When we talk about people, in the end, you got to think about what's your motivation to go to sleep? Why is your motivation to get out of bed, right? Waking up is one thing. Getting out of bed is something very different, right? You don't really have to get out of bed. Every one of you, if I ask you why you got out of bed this morning, you have the same answer, because I had to, right? Because you had to. You all could have slept a little bit longer. You all could have been, but something happened that you had no choice. You had to, right? And I want you to think about your kids or the adults in your lives. What's the incentive for them to go to sleep? What's the incentive to get out of bed? Are you looking forward to tomorrow, or is tomorrow a drag? Do you hate school? Do you really want to go there? If your kid's in some special program, does they really want to be there, or do they have to be there on time because you got to be somewhere else? Do they have a different incentive, right? And if I was 15 or 16 years old and I want to do anything I want to do that's private, I got to wait for my parents to go to sleep, right? There's an incentive to stay awake. What's their motivation for them to go to sleep, right? So there are four things that can regulate anybody's sleep. So you're asking how to get somebody to sleep? First, they have to accept that they want their sleep to improve. When we talk about sleep in anybody's sleep situation, and if you want to talk to you about your private sleep situations, all sleep problems in my mind, I break them down into four components. I want to know the amount of sleep you're getting, right? Simple, the amount of sleep. The more sleep you get, the better you in theory should be. The quality of your sleep. I had this little boy, he's about 3 or 4 years old, named Eric. And I always remember Eric because he came to see me like any other patient. I said, why are you here? And Eric looked me in the eye. Usually little kids don't look you in the eye. He looked me in the eye and said, Doctor, sleeping makes me tired. And that stayed with me. Sleeping makes me tired. Eric had huge tonsils. He couldn't breathe. The more he slept, the worse he was going to be. But the mother was perplexed. She did not know anything about sleep apnea. She goes, I don't know what's wrong. He sleeps more than his friends. Some of his friends have already stopped napping. He still naps. He's always tired. No matter how much sleep he gets, he's always tired. He had big tonsils. So when all of you in the beginning were telling me that you have kids who are always tired or you're always tired, it doesn't make sense. If it's the hours of sleep, then on weekends or holidays or vacation, you should then feel okay. But if you're always tired, no matter how much sleep you're getting, then you got to think about the quality of your sleep. And that's somebody you want to then evaluate their sleep. And to me, that's always one of the key questions. So the amount of sleep is important. The quality of your sleep is important. What else do I want to know about your sleep? If I want to discuss your sleep problems, I want to know the timing of your sleep. Do you sleep in on weekends? Are you a shift worker? Do you work 2 jobs? Are you doing night school? What else is going on? Right? The timing of your sleep. And the fourth thing I want to know, and probably the most overriding, what overrides everything, is your state of mind. Right? Do you enjoy your life, right? Or do you hate your life? Do you like what you're getting up for, or do you hate it? What are you getting up for? You're getting up something that you don't want to do? If you hate exercising and the first thing in the morning is for you to get on the elliptical, it's not happening, right? It's not happening, right? So a lot of times we'll have parents, or the kids come to me and they say, well, they're staying up late because they want to do video games or something, right? What I tell the kids is, I want you to play video games first thing in the morning. The earlier you wake up, the more you can play. Give somebody a reason to get up in the morning. What's your incentive to get out of bed, right? Because they're going to play, right? They're going to be sneaking there from you. Let's say just play first thing in the morning. There's always somebody they can play with. And then they get bright light in their eyes. Well, you're trying to shield them away from light at night. But you want lots of light in the morning. You need a reason to get up. But the way you do this, it's very important, parents. You don't force people to do this. None of these circadian disorders, none of this stuff will work if you impose it on somebody. The first thing you want to do with any teenager, when I meet a teenager, is I want to know whose idea was you to come here. Same thing I asked tonight. Why are you here tonight? Right? Because if you think nothing is wrong, we're done. Right? Do you think you have a problem with your sleep? And if you do, let's talk about how to make it better. But if you think your sleep is perfect, there's nothing to change. Then it's just an imposition and a battle of wills. In too many households, and yours may be one of them, the nights end with an argument about bedtime, and the mornings end with an argument about getting out of bed. And it's just a hassle to live that way with somebody. It becomes a real drag. We love our kids, but it's such a hassle if that's a fight every night about bedtime and a fight every night about this. Because they're trying to outplay you, outsmart you. How they're trying to game it. Stop the nonsense. Let's just have a conversation with them. Do you believe in the biology that your brain needs sleep? If so, you think so? How much sleep do you need? It's just a math question. Let's work this out. You having a debate about food? Probably not as much. But let's think about this. You can regulate anybody's sleep with looking at 4 variables. Spell the word self. It's an acronym. It's easy to use. you can change anybody's sleep cycle and sleep patterns if you regulate these 4 variables: social interactions, exercise, light, and food. A lot of people, when they have sleep problems, they feel it's out of their control, and they say things like, if I'm lucky, I'll get 5 hours of sleep. If I'm lucky, I'll get sleep tonight. Right? If I'm lucky, I'll hit the lottery. But if I'm lucky, sleep shouldn't be that way. Right? They say this a lot. You can regulate anybody's sleep by looking at the 4 variables. For example, you can take a wild rat, simple science fair experiment, if you're allowed to deal with wild rats. Okay? Take a wild rat, a nocturnal animal, genetically set up to be nocturnal. All his family's nocturnal. You take that rat and put it in a cage. In a simple experiment, you only give it food when you turn on the lights. When you turn off the lights, you take the food away. Turn on the lights, there's food. What's the rat going to do? It's going to go hungry at first because they're nocturnal. They're scared to eat when the lights are on. They can be attacked. But eventually, the need for food will motivate them to change their pattern. And you make a nocturnal animal behave like a diurnal animal by simply changing the timing of their meals. What does that mean to you guys as teenagers? It means your tendencies are not your destiny. Right? Think about that. You know, sometimes you look at your parents and go, oh no, right? Your tendencies are not your destiny, right? Right? Things can change. Just because you happen to be a night person, you happen to be this way, doesn't mean you have to stay that way. You can change if you have motivation to do that, if it's important to you to do that. So a lot of the times with these teenagers, they may say things like, well, they stay up and do the homework. Now they're going to bed. It's now 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. Turn off the TV finally, turn off the computer finally, turn off whatever. Now what's kids want to do? They want to go eat, right? They want to go eat. Why? Because they haven't eaten. They skipped dinner. And these same kids are skipping breakfast. If you explain to your child, hey, do you want help regulating your sleep? If they accept you helping them, that's the first thing. You can't impose it. Then it becomes a fight. You don't want that, right? You want to help them, right? And they have to be able to be open-minded to being helped. You say, hey, man, you want to stay up, go ahead, but there's no food after dinner. There's no food after 7 or 8. Watch them stop skipping breakfast, right? Because they may just get up to just get breakfast. But if you eat super late before you go to bed, then you crash because you're exhausted, you wake up, you may not be that hungry, and then you skip breakfast, right? So timing of the meals is important, just that. Light exposure, food intake, exercise, all these things can regulate how you sleep, and you can be in control. The good thing about this is, as a young adult, you can be in charge of how you sleep. You're not at the mercy of some whim of something else that's happening. You can regulate your own sleep if you learn about this stuff. We should be wrapping up, but this gets on to, can be sleep kids learn anything. This is somber data. This is not happy news. I'm sharing with you guys. Lack of sleep is an independent risk factor for suicidal thinking and suicidal behavior. The kids with the highest suicide rate in the world are in South Korea. There's also the kids that get the less sleep on the planet. All the surveys show that. This is a sad situation. Lack of sleep. Remember I told you before about behaviorally induced insufficient sleep syndrome, BIISS? Simply sleeping in more than 2 hours on weekends, getting 7 hours or less of sleep during the week, and being a sleepy person in general predicts you having suicidal behavior, suicidal thinking. It's not that everybody's going to do it. I'm not saying that, guys. But that's the second most common cause of death in this age group. It's tied in directly to the amount of sleep that they're getting. People say, well, they're just depressed. That's why they're doing it. Well, yeah, we don't want to ignore depression. But it turns out that lack of sleep by itself, independent of mood, also makes people think about doing this kind of stuff, independent of mood. There's actually something now going on called the Great Sleep Recession. Starting in 1991, well before there was any iPhones around. Remember, that was 2007. 91, we weren't really using video games too much, were we? 91, they already started measuring and picking up on this, that there was a national trend of teenagers not getting enough sleep, in particular teenage girls not getting enough sleep. Whenever you interact with any teenager, you should just assume they're not getting enough sleep. Just know that. The odds are that that teenager, if you've got a pack of teenagers, forget it. Odds are somebody's not getting enough sleep. And one of the weird things about not getting enough sleep, to the brain it means something is wrong. So the brain secretes more cortisol when you're not getting enough sleep. It's a stress hormone. So you actually have a little euphoria. You feel giddy when you don't get enough sleep. You feel kind of happy when you don't get enough sleep. It has this funny effect on people. But you also start making mistakes. In fact, they did something with driver simulators where they sleep-deprived people on purpose and put them behind a video of a car. The more sleep-deprived, especially the boys, the more sleep-deprived they were, the more likely they were to make mistakes, but also the more likely they were to rate themselves as driving well because they take chances. And this is one thing that happens, is when the brain doesn't get enough sleep, all of our DNA came from risk takers. People who are complacent did not pass on their DNA. We all here because our ancestors took chances and were aggressive and did things. Turns out our brains are primed that if something is wrong, to take a chance. If the brain thinks something is wrong, it's whatever it's been doing is not working, the brain will take a chance. And that's not been measured with lack of sleep. The brain thinks something is wrong. And when you don't get enough sleep, particularly teenagers, they overvalue the rewards and undervalue the risk of any activity they're doing. You take chances. Lack of sleep makes people impulsive. And some of the suicides we have around here are impulsive suicides. This is actually data. You can look at numbers. You can question things. This is 2018. And they had 598,000 teenagers that they looked at. 598,000 teenagers, 500,000 teenagers, they did this. And they found that sleep duration is an independent risk factor for development of youth suicidality. Just not getting enough sleep predicts that behavior. Because it makes people impulsive. And because of this, in 2014, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended that all high schools and junior high schools in the United States start no earlier than 8:30 in the morning. You guys heard about this? 8:30, ma'am. American Academy of Pediatrics. Now, why did they do this? Because the science was so strong. This is the same level of evidence that is being used to recommend vaccinations. Academy of Pediatrics makes the vaccination schedules. Whatever you feel about vaccinations, there's a data, the body of science behind it. You can't accept or reject science. That's your decision, right? But the data is that when kids got more sleep, moods improved, grades improved, less car accidents around the schools. This has all been found to work. Whenever they let the kids sleep more, they do better in school. The cynics among us will say, well, if school starts later, the kids are going to stay up later. You can think that. That's fine if you think that, but you can ask what's the data on it, right? It's already been done. It's been measured. Turns out that when the kids are allowed to stay up, to go to bed later, start school later, they actually stay up a little bit later, but they actually get more sleep. So in Minnesota, when it was first tested 20 years ago, 20 years now, they found that if you delayed the school time by an hour, the average kid got 40 minutes more sleep per night. In one study, they only changed the school time by 15 minutes, and the kids ended up with 20 more minutes of sleep because they started realizing the importance of sleeping. They felt better. The data is that if they give them later time to start school, the kids actually will take advantage of that. It's similar to saying to somebody, listen, I know you're starving. I'm not going to give you any food because you're going to waste the food. People don't do that. They'll eat the food, right? Yeah, you know. So this is what's happening. We want these kids to change the school start. We want to follow this. And when it doesn't happen, you got to say, well, is there any other guidelines kind of pediatrics people aren't following? I mean, what's going on with this? So you guys heard about this bill, 328? Any of you familiar with this? Anybody not familiar? Raise your hands if you don't know about it. Okay, so let's talk about this right now. In California, we have a chance to be the first state in the country to delay start time statewide. 328, by the way this happened was one mom, just one mom, wrote a letter to the editor of the LA Times, and a state senator read the letter, and he introduced a one-sentence bill saying schools should start no earlier than 8:30 in California for high school, middle schools. That's how it was. I asked about it, and they asked me to testify in Sacramento. So I got to testify a couple of times about this thing. So I've been there. Not the best thing I've ever done. We can talk about that some other time. We're going to run out of time. So this is a real bill. This is happening right now. So 328. Basically, a bunch of parents, there's some group of moms in Sacramento, have been walking the halls of Sacramento for like 10 years, trying to get this to pass. A bunch of moms, doctors, Packard Hospital was behind this, and all they did was hand out PDFs of articles. All we did, zero fundraising. Nobody were hit up for money, right, for this. There was no fundraising at all. We just handed out articles, shared them with people, and we got the bill passed the Assembly and the Senate. Ended up dying because Governor Jerry Brown vetoed it. And he vetoed it. What happened was school board administrators, local school administrators, thought that the start time should not be controlled at Sacramento, that they should decide that. So they actually ran radio commercials asking Governor Brown to veto the bill. So it died.
And wait, and the teachers union was against it?
There are two teachers unions in California. I don't know if any teachers are here. The California Federation of Teachers supported it. The California Teachers Association was opposed it because start times is part of collective bargaining agreements. It's something that they do. And again, if school starts later, school ends later. and some teachers have part-time jobs. There are other issues. This is something, and some schools have contracts where they can't change the school district unless a member agree, right? So we viewed this as a health issue, but we walked into this buzzsaw of the fight between Sacramento and the local schools. The charter school people are not happy with it because they don't want to be told what to do. And the answer was, we can change the school start time anytime we want to. We don't need Sacramento to impose it on us. But guys, who set up the school schedule already? These guys, these local school administrators. It used to be 9 o'clock in California. It got pushed back gradually later and later. In Europe, it's often 9:30. But high schools used to start at 9 o'clock in California. And what happened is transportation got underfunded. So they just started skewing the buses around. So anyway, 328 died. Governor Brown vetoed it. It got reintroduced again. I'm testifying again, if all goes well, hopefully. I get to testify. I get to go to Sacramento again to talk about it. And hopefully Governor Newsom, the indications we're getting is that he may be supportive of it. So we'll see if this happens. But if this happens, it would be the first state in the country to have this as law for the public schools. From the start no later than 8:30. By the way, to give people time, it has a 3-year implementation. So it's not that you got to change your work job and everything else right away. But there's a domino effect. If schools start later, they let out. So there's some other issues. One thing that they have found in school districts where they change the school start times is juvenile crime rates went down because juvenile crime peaks after school lets out. Schools are going to let out later. And the reason that we can't do it individually, school by school, first of all, you have to have every single school have a meeting, every single parent has a vote. And you know what school board meetings can be like if somebody has an agenda item. But also, if you do it individually, then the teams and the schools don't link up together. So here's something we can talk about. I want to wrap up, but just a couple of things. There's some myths about sleep. And I'd be remiss if I don't go over this with you. Why do kids fall asleep in high school but not in elementary school? People say because they're bored. Nonsense. What was more boring, high school or elementary school? Right? It's all your perspective. That was your experience, right? It doesn't matter. It's subjective, right? But the thing is, with people don't fall asleep because they're bored. That's what I want you to learn. Boredom does not make anybody here sleepy. Boredom simply means to your brain that you're safe, because monotony is equated with safety. Sleep is the most dangerous thing you can do. So if you are in a boring environment, therefore you are safe, therefore you can catch up on whatever you need. If you're hungry, you'll eat. And if you're not hungry and you're sleepy, you'll sleep. That's what's happening. Monotony is unmasking your sleepiness. It's not making you sleepy. In fact, you remember your kids when they were little? When they were little and they were bored, did they say, Mommy, let me put my head down? No. Right? They didn't do that. Imagine, remember you taking your kids to Disneyland and the money you spend and the kids says to you they're bored? You're like, oh, right? They're bored there, right? It's horrible. I'm bored. I'm bored. Your parents, right? And when you go to the doctor or something with the kids, you bring everything with you so that kid not be bored, right? Because you want to entertain them constantly, right? They can't be bored. Here, take my phone. Here, take this iPad, whatever you need, right? Don't want you to be bored. But they don't fall asleep when they're bored. So when kids fall asleep in class, it's because they're sleep deprived. It's not because they're bored. And how do kids think of a good teacher these days? It's not how well they teach the materials, how entertaining they are. You got to entertain, right? You're nodding your head. The teacher's funny. The teacher is entertaining. That's the good teacher, because that'll keep you awake. So now we're tap dancing and juggling for you, right? Because you didn't get enough sleep. So that's a myth. What else? You can't catch up your sleep on weekends. It doesn't work. We talked about this before. If you're starving, you just can't eat on weekends and then starve on Monday through Friday. The biological clock in your brain does not let you do that. If you normally sleep 8 hours, let's say, if you're normally an 8-hour sleeper and you skip sleep completely, you only get 0 sleep one night. You just skip sleep completely one night. Are you going to sleep 16 the next day? That's not safe. The brain won't let you do that. You may sleep maybe 10 hours for the next 3 to 4 days to catch up. You can't make up 5 days of sleep deficit in a 2-day weekend. You can get there a little bit, but you won't be able to fully saturate yourself. You can't sleep satiate yourself. You can't just, the body doesn't allow you to do that. Really, because the clock in your brain wants to predict dawn. So if you if you're a good sleeper and you wake up every day at the same time, when you travel, when all these things happen to you, even if you're sleep deprived, you still wake up around the same time. Because your brain is trying to predict dawn and dusk. There's a mechanism in your brain to predict dawn and dusk. That's the biological clock part of your brain. In fact, the science behind the biological clock got the 2017 Nobel Prize in science, physiology, because this is kind of an interesting issue. The genes in your brain that predict your sleep schedule are the same in flies. It's just a robust thing that we have. It's essential for us as land-based animals to predict dawn and dusk. We have to.
Why didn't you change your, like you make the room really dark?
That's good. You're still going to wake up.
Because of the previous.
The brain knows what happened previously the day, right? Right? The biological clock cannot be thrown off by the weather. A cloudy day should not throw off your rhythm. It doesn't work. It has to be robust, right? We can't be at the whim of the weather. We'd be fragile creatures. Sports teams will suffer. It turns out that when teenagers get more sleep, they get less sporting accidents. So a lot of school districts, when they first want to change the school time, the teachers, the athletic teachers say, well, it's going to mess up the schedule for the practice. But once the school has changed, the biggest defenders of the change are the athletic directors, because they see the kids performing better, less grumpy, more attentive. Because again, we get into accidents where we're inattentive. Sleep-deprived kids are inattentive, especially in the afternoon. I went to a school board meeting in Palo Alto. I don't know if any of you were there, but one of the when we presented the information about the school start time and the whole idea of the Academy of Pediatrics, one kid got up from Palo Alto, from Gunn High School, I think it was. It could have been Pali, but one of the kids got up and said that these studies do not apply to them because these apply to the average student, and we're not average in Palo Alto. Not only did this child say this, but a school board member was there, congratulated the student for being a better statistician than the Academy of Pediatrics, for finding the flaw in the research.
Oh, privilege. Yay.
So, but guess what, guys? My kids are average and so are yours, okay? They're just good at some things more than others. They're different and they're unique and they're special and we love them to death. But on average, our kids are average, right? The average kid is average around here. And the electronics, they get skipped all the time. I don't think that's, I mean, it's important if you can get them away. But they've actually done this study where they actually make teenagers to force them to give up their electronics. They sleep worse because they're pissed off. They're mad. I'm sorry, Ethan, I did it again. But they get annoyed, okay? They get mad. They take away the electronics. Anyway, I want you to get a good night's sleep and charge your brains. We'll stop there, guys. Thank you for listening. My wish for all you guys is more sleep and less homework. We got 5 or 6 minutes for questions. Yes. Anybody didn't ask a question? Let's be fair. I don't think you asked any, and you didn't ask any. I'll go to you two first. Okay? Hi.
I was wondering what you think about melatonin as a way to get sleep.
So melatonin is a hormone that the brain makes to let you know the night's approaching. Melatonin does not make us sleepy per se. In fact, a rat, a nocturnal animal we talked about before, their brains make melatonin and release it at night also. But to the rat, melatonin signals their brain to get busy. So melatonin per se does not make you sleepy, it just means the night's approaching. And the melatonin is expected to hit the melatonin receptors, which are closed by light. So if you can eat pounds of melatonin. If the lights are on, the melatonin really won't work. So melatonin has not been that effective as an agent for most people with sleep problems. Having said that, it's commonly given. This was actually studied over-the-counter. Melatonin has been studied. And in certain populations, it does work. Kids with autism, by the way, seems to help at higher dosages. Okay, so and the elderly, it seems to work also. Because as we get older, our pineal gland, which makes melatonin, calcifies. But there was a study done in Canada of over-the-counter melatonin, and they found that the bottles fluctuated what's in the bottle than what was inside by over 400%, even within brands. And one of the worst ones were the gummy ones. And also the gummy melatonins and the ones that had combinations, a little bit of magnesium and hops, but they were all bad. In Europe and in other parts of the world, melatonin is a prescription item, and you can get pharmaceutical-grade melatonin. Most of the time, if your kids are happy with it and it's working, fine. But I wouldn't be pushing it. Most people, before they see us, already try melatonin on their own. So I see a lot of melatonin failures. But if somebody tells me, somebody's going to walk over to me and say, it works for my kid and works for me, I'm like, cool, that's fine. That's fine. But usually, you're taking it for a reason. Because our goal with all our patients, everybody we see, we want you to fall asleep easily, sleep through the night, wake up refreshed, and not take any medication at all. Why should you have to take anything? I mean, we've been sleeping since we're born. We've been sleeping before we're born, right? We slept, right? Kids will sleep like 80% of the time in utero. Why do we have these hassles? So you had a question?
Yeah, so you make a very great case why we should all be sleeping enough at night. But
I'm waiting for the but, yeah, but what?
But what practical advice do you have for us parents who know that our kids are staying up till 12 or 1 and not getting enough sleep, and we're sort of at our wits' end about it?
Well, I mentioned it before. I really want the child themselves to think they have a problem. That's the most important thing. They have to own it. It's part of learning how your body works. the biology, just like when they go through puberty, we have a biological shift to go to bed later. That's a real thing. So they have to understand how that works. They have to understand that how sleep is good for them. So the most important thing I can do for a teenager is first get them to accept that there's something wrong, for them to understand. If your teenager thinks everything is fine and you're just on their case because you don't understand the world, save your breath. You're not going to get anywhere. If your kid says to you, hey, I have a problem with this. All my friends are tired. Let's talk about it. So that's where you want them to be with them. Get them to think about sleep. How are they happy with how it's happening? If they think something is wrong with their sleep, if they accept that, or if they accept at least that there's room for improvement, then we can have a conversation. Say, hey, do you want to talk with somebody about this? Who knows? Many, many times I've had conversations with teenagers in the room, and in the end the parents say, they told you exactly the same thing I told you, right? But it sounds a little different. And the thing about sleep things, well, these sleep hygiene tips and these other things you guys read about, all that advice, when it's been studied, sleep hygiene in general doesn't work. It's never been shown to be effective. It's commonly talked about, but never been shown to be effective. Not a single paper shows that it works on somebody who has a sleep disorder. It's advice for everybody in general to do, but it doesn't help. If you're an anxious person, it doesn't help me to go tell you, hey, relax. That's not going to work. You need something more than that, you know? If you're upset and your partner says to you, hey, don't be mad. You get angrier, right? Don't tell me how to feel, right? So with the teenagers, it's super important for them to accept and to understand what's happening with their bodies. And then we talk about, hey, is there room for improvement? Is there something that's not right? For example, if a teenager cares about athletic performance, I didn't show you the slides. Andre Iguodala, a lot of the guys in the Warriors, a lot of professional athletes, they have sleep trainers now because they do better. Stanford varsity basketball team, when they made them spend more time in bed, the free throw points went up. So if you're into sports, you do better. If you're into memory, find out what's important to the kid and how can sleep help you. Because you learn better with sleep. So that's the real important thing. Don't impose it on them. Get them to understand. It's part of their body. This is taught in health class, right? And they'll read about it. Let them read about the late sleep phase. Give them some things to read. They'll look up Wikipedia. They'll read and say, hey, do you want some help with this? We know how to fix this. I said in the beginning of the talk, I don't think you had been here, the vast majority of people we see get better. So if you have a kid who's having trouble with their sleep, a lot of times what kids are doing also, they're watching watching us as parents, and they're looking for hypocrisy, any slip that we can, right? So if you tell them to do something, but you're doing something different, that's going to be an issue. We'll have a talk. Yes, sir. You two in the back, both of you. She raised her hand first, actually. So, yeah.
Super question. Can they take a nap if they're sleep deprived? Like my son goes to bed from like 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. then naps around 5 to 8 p.m. Some days have.
From 5 to 8, a 3-hour nap?
Yeah, so it's 5, and then 3.
That's a long nap. Nap should be 40 minutes or less.
Okay, but is it okay for them to nap?
Well, it depends what you mean by napping, right? Napping is like snacking, right? So is it okay to snack? Well, it depends. We anticipate our meals, right? If you know you're going to have a really good meal, you're going to go out somewhere really nice, you may have a light lunch. If you're going to visit somebody who you don't trust the food at their house, you make sure you eat before you get to their house. So food and sleep is like that. So it's okay to nap if that's what they want to do. But if he's saying, I'm sleeping 3 hours here because I don't want to be up till 1 o'clock, and he's happy with that and you're happy, that's a lifestyle choice. It's an issue, but it doesn't work out that well later. It depends, right? What we want the kids to do is to learn how the bodies work so they can change and adapt to what they want to do.
I was just going to ask if there's any relationship to meditation.
So we have a lecture on that at the class. Remember I said you do? There's a doctor at Stanford named Dr. Mark Abramson. Look up Mark Abramson. He's a dentist who's also a sleep expert, and he teaches meditation at Stanford. So he has meditation workshops and things like that. So we incorporate a lot of mindfulness techniques, which is a school of thought for meditation, into how to treat insomnia. There are dozens of sleep disorders. We didn't have time to get obviously into all of them. But yes, we incorporate some of the mindfulness techniques into this so we can use meditation. But meditation does not replace sleep. That's actually been looked at. So it won't be able to do that. It's not the same. Now, the Dalai Lama, I've learned this because remember I told you that I have a saying that's on the internet? So the Dalai Lama has one too. And he's usually below me. But his says, sleep is the best meditation. You guys seen that quote before from the Dalai Lama? There's some poster thing, sleep is the best meditation. But it's not exactly the same. When people, when they meditate, get into alpha states, when they close your eyes, and there's something to alpha in sleep also, which is the wakefulness before you fall asleep. But this is commonly asked. Sleep, We incorporate these techniques into insomnia to get people to be in states of serenity. Because meditation is about focusing, right, and not being distracted by the outside things. And a lot of these outside things is the circular thoughts that we have and racing thoughts. So meditation techniques are taught to our insomnia patients. So that's helpful. But meditation by itself will not replace sleep. There's something else, though, that you'll read about sometimes, which is segmented sleep. And people have these weird sleep schedules, where they'll sleep 3 hours, awake for 6, sleep 3, and they're at different times, and they'll do this kind of segmented sleeps. But those are hard to live a social life that way. There's social difficulties with doing that. One or two more questions, maybe one? Yes, you.
Thank you.
What does it mean if we have a sleep paralysis?
So you guys know what sleep paralysis is? Actually, it's past days. Let's finish with this. This is fun. Okay? Sleep paralysis is a sensation of not being able to move. Have you had the feeling?
I've had a lot of
Hypnagogic hallucinations. Has your mom had a lot of hallucinations? Your mom? Have you had a lot of hallucinations too? It runs in the family, maybe the hallucinations thing. I mean, a lot of these people hallucinate, but what happens is during normal dreaming sleep, if you look at just your brain waves, we can't tell whether you're awake or you're dreaming. Your brain waves look the same when you're dreaming and when you're awake. In fact, when you are dreaming, if you have a sedentary lifestyle, your peak heart rate is when you're dreaming. Your peak heart rate is when you're dreaming, right? Heart attacks cluster in the early morning hours. Remember I told you that dreaming dominates the last third of the night? That's also when heart attacks cluster. They're not evenly distributed. For some people, the biggest workout the body gets is dreaming. That's what happens. It's true. That's true. For most people in this room, their peak heart rate is actually when they're dreaming. And dreaming requires lots of energy. Okay? For you to see me right now, I'm reflecting light into your retina. For you, hopefully it doesn't happen, have a dream about me, right? You have to create that image. It requires more energy, right? So dreaming can actually use up more energy. Part of the dreaming, the brain looks like it's completely awake. We have these fast eye movements, but our muscle tone, the resting state of our muscles, goes down. It's not that we're relaxed. It's the opposite. Their brain has sent a signal down the spinal cord. Don't move your arms or legs now. If you're relaxed and I tap your reflexes with a hammer, your reflexes would be brisk. When you're dreaming, I can whack all day and your arm won't move. Your arms and legs can't move when you're dreaming. The striated muscles between your ribs can't move. If you're eating ribs, that's what you're eating, those muscles. Those muscles can't move when you're dreaming. And what happens is you can be in the middle of a dream that's so scary, you can wake up, and your two halves of your brain become conscious. I'm awake. But the signal from my spinal cord is not lifted yet, and I can't move. Sometimes you feel like you want to scream and you can't get the scream out. But you feel this weight on your chest because you can't move your ribs up and down. You're only inflating your lungs with your diaphragm. Okay? And in fact, if you learn about how the brain works and this biology stuff, the phrenic nerve bypasses the spinal cord to get to the diaphragm because everything else with the spinal cord gets shut down when you're dreaming. So we need a separate wire just to get to the diaphragm to keep us breathing, and another wire called the vagus nerve to the heart. Everything else through the spinal cord shuts down when you're dreaming. So this is what happens sometimes is when you wake up, you feel this weight on your chest. You can't move. And in Asian cultures, sometimes you're told, what were you told? Ghost. There's a ghost sitting on your chest. Isn't that a lovely thing for them to tell you? And you can't sleep because there's a ghost sitting on your chest. That's why you can't move. It's also called, you can look it up, the old hag syndrome, H-A-G. That's a medical term. I'm a professional. Look it up. The old hag syndrome is against sleep paralysis. What's happening, it means that you are either waking up abruptly, or when you have it also as you're drifting into sleep. Sometimes as you fall asleep, you have your legs twist on you or things jerk on you that way. Motor control of your arms and legs is different awake than sleep. When you transition, you can backfire. So if you have these hypnic jerks like that, or you feel like sinking into the mattress, or hear somebody calling your name, or hear footsteps coming, all these things can happen in these transitions. What's happening is you're giving your body mixed signals. I'm in bed because I want to sleep, but I'm staying awake. I did when I was a little boy. I remember being really scared and seeing a witch's head float across the room. I can see her right now. I can visualize. She had a green face. Okay, I can see her right now. Okay, but that stayed with me. But that was because you're in bed trying to sleep, but you're also staying awake, and you get caught in these transition zones. That's what happens a lot. Anyway, is that okay? Thanks for listening, guys. We'll stop there. Thank you.